5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the topic of the special order.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about a remarkable individual that serves with us in the House of Representatives. We are really surrounded by remarkable people, 435 individuals who came from other walks of life. Most of them had other careers before they came to the House of Representatives. But tonight we want to talk about the anniversary of one individual. Because you see, 40 years ago, Colonel Sam Johnson was released as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. He had spent 7 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. And it all started when he was flying one of his F-4s. Being a pilot, this was not a new experience. I mean, after all, he had served in Korea and flew 62 combat missions in an F-86 Sabre called Shirley's Texas Tornado, after his wife, Shirley. So he flew 62 in Korean War. Vietnam, he's on his 25th mission, flying an F-4 Phantom. He left Laotian airspace, came into North Vietnam, and he was shot down by ground fire. This was not his first tour of duty in Vietnam. It was his second tour of duty. Sam Johnson is an American warrior. And after he was shot down on this day, April the 16th, 1966, his life took a turn, a different turn. When he parachuted out of his plane, his shoulder was injured. Of course, the Vietnamese, they didn't do anything to help his injuries, and he still carries some of those wounds from his prisoner's days and from when he crashed or when he came back down to earth in that parachute. He was captured by the North Vietnamese Army, and he was put in a prisoner of war camp. The North Vietnamese probably developed prisoner of war camps better than any place on earth. They were hard, they were tough, they were mean, and not everybody survived those camps. So he spent 7 years as a prisoner of war, and they interrogated him every day. But Sam never gave in. In fact, the Vietnamese called him Die Hard. He was the first person that I know of that was called Die Hard, because he would never die, no matter how hard they beat him. And so he was so obstinate, Mr. Speaker, that they sent him to the infamous Hanoi Hilton, satire, of course. It was everything but a hotel, and put him in a section called Alcatraz, where he and 11 obstinate prisoners of war were put together. Sam Johnson was so tough, would never break, would never give information, that they finally put him in a solitary confinement. Mr. Speaker, I want to describe the cell to you that he spent 4 years of his life in. Solitary confinement. It was 3 foot by 9 foot. It's about the size of this table, 3 foot, over to about that podium, 9 foot. That was his cell. That's where he was for 4 years. Left the light on constantly. At night they'd come in, put him in leg irons. 4 years, solitary confinement. But he never gave up. He learned how to communicate with other prisoners by tapping on the wall. He learned the names of the other 374 members, memorized their names so that when he got out, because he expected to get out, that he could tell their families that they were there. But he never broke. He was never broken. And he continued to do what he was supposed to do and honor America and represent America, but he never gave information to America's enemies. And so tonight, we commemorate his 40th anniversary from being released from that prisoner of war camp when the war was over. 7 years of his life he gave to this country in a camp that most of us would never survive. At this time, I'd like to yield time to the Majority Leader, Eric Cantor of Virginia, for as much time as he wishes to use.
Mr. Speaker, thank the gentleman from Texas. Mr. Speaker, we are here tonight to honor and celebrate our friend Sam Johnson. The gentleman we all know as a friend and colleague, but that I think America knows as a hero. Sam, as the gentleman from Texas points out, was awarded 2 Silver Stars and 2 Purple Hearts, among his many other decorations, for fighting bravely for freedom, and how for 7 years Sam Johnson was held as a prisoner of war by the North Vietnamese, the horror of which none of us will ever know, but lies deep within the soul of this great American patriot. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the 40th anniversary of his freedom is reason for celebration and is the reason we are gathered here in the chamber tonight. Sam's heroism and bravery are acts for which all Americans owe him a debt of gratitude. But I'd also like to talk about our friend Sam. Mr. Speaker, it's no exaggeration when I say I believe that Sam Johnson is the moral compass of our conference. He considers every issue fairly, and he's never afraid to reach across the aisle and work with members there or on our side of the aisle, or with freshman members, as he did with me when I first came to Congress in 2001. As many of us know, Sam and Shirley Johnson recently lost their son, Bob. All of us would like to extend our deepest sympathy to the Johnsons for their loss. And over these past weeks, we all saw anew of the grace and humility that Sam carries with him every day. Mr. Speaker, that's Sam. America and his beloved Texas are better places because of his decades-long service. And my life, Mr. Speaker, has been immeasurably enriched by our friendship. And I yield back.
Thank the Majority Leader for his important words. I now yield to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Pete Sessions.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, for leading the discussion tonight in honor of the great member of Congress from the 3rd Congressional District, Sam Johnson. I want to take a few minutes tonight and to not just acknowledge how great Sam Johnson is to the Texas delegation, but really to highlight what he means to this body. Sam Johnson has been a member of this body since 1991. He came in a special election as a result of a hard-fought race in Dallas, Texas, when Congressman Steve Bartlett stepped down. And Sam Johnson came to the United States Congress not just with a background of 29 years of serving in the United States Air Force as being a Top Gun pilot and a man who had served his country in war and at the Hanoi Hilton, but he came here with thoughts and ideas about his home of Texas. Representing Collin County and Dallas County, Texas, is not just a high honor for us to have Sam as our member of Congress at that time and currently, but Sam came to this body with ideas that he felt like that would make our country stronger and better. More than just respect for the flag, respect for the men and women that serve in our military, but really for respect for human life and individuals. He believes that individuals make our country stronger and better, and he has devoted his life. The times we fly back and forth, Sam talks about how important people are in people's dreams, people back home. He remembers not just the stories about individuals, but I think he idolizes hard work and people who commit themselves to the sacrifice for others. Sam is known in this body for several years now as the most admired member of Congress. And he's not the most admired member of Congress because of just being a nice man, and that he is, but really for standing up and talking about the values of this country. The values of this country, what we stand for, and how he wants it to be even better. He and Shirley have for years stood up across Texas and across this country and talked about how important we are if we sacrifice to make others' lives better than the way we found it. And so tonight, on behalf of the people of the 32nd Congressional District, which is Dallas, which is right next to Congressman Sam Johnson, I stand up and applaud the life of Sam Johnson, the service to our country, not just the United States Air Force and the American people, but also the man that calls home of Plano, Texas, and the 3rd Congressional Texas, our great friend and colleague, Congressman Sam Johnson. So, Sam, congratulations. Congratulations for not just a job well done, but for the 40 years that you have been back home and what you have done to your life as a result of the service for what you believe was the right thing to do. I thank the gentleman from Texas, Judge Poe, for the time, and I yield back my time.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Sessions, points out a little-known fact that after Colonel Sam Johnson got out of that prisoner of war camp, he stayed in the Air Force, served a total of 29 years. He also served in the famed Thunderbirds. He has quite a remarkable Air Force career. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Ralph Hall, the senior member of the Texas delegation and the House of Representatives.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague. I do rise as others today for a great American and a very dear friend, Sam Johnson. It's been said over and over again about Operation Homecoming, but that's one of the great days that I remember. And I'm sure it's in Sam's mind and heart, and he appreciates all of us getting to say a few words about him. He served, as you know, for 29 years in the United States Air Force, flying combat missions in both Korea and Vietnam. Captured by enemy forces, go on to spend 7 years captivity as a prisoner of war, including 42 months of solitary confinement. Despite that confinement, Sam never lost his faith in God. He continued to show leadership and courage, helping to teach other prisoners how to survive. Through those 7 years, Sam remained committed to staying strong and helping other fellow soldiers do the same thing. And finally, on February the 12th, 1973, he returned to U.S. soil with other fellow American servicemen as what was known as Operation Homecoming. Once home, he was reunited with his wife, Shirley, who faithfully waited and prayed for Sam's safe return. As a fact about Sam's fighting for our country, he also suffered for our country. This isn't the prime reason his constituents vote for him, though it would be enough, but Sam's completely aware of the rules of the House of Representatives and one of the Speaker's leading whips. When Sam speaks, we listen. Sam and Shirley suffered the loss of a son the last week of February. I hope they felt the love and grief we shared with them and the family. We know that grief is addressed in the Bible. Love spawns grief, and without love, there's little grief. There's much love in the Johnson family, their neighbors and friends. For the approximate 7 years, Sam and the others suffered in Hanoi healthy. A 4-letter word was always on their mind: home. In closing, let me just say that Sam continues to fight on the behalf of our veterans and members of the armed services. After 40 years, he continues to serve the American people with the same strength and resolve that he demonstrated in Vietnam. I'm truly honored to have the opportunity to serve with such an exemplary American and to call him a friend. Sam's commitment to his country, faith, and family are values that every American should live by. I ask all my colleagues, of course, to vote aye. Now, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend. I yield back.
Without objection.
Thank the gentleman for his wise words. I now yield to the gentlelady from Fort Worth, Texas, Ms. Kay Granger.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we're here tonight to honor our friend and colleague, Sam Johnson, a man of service, a man of faith, and a man of tremendous courage. Sam was released from captivity 40 years ago as part of Operation Homecoming. It was a plan to bring home POWs as part of the Paris Peace Accords of 1973. 591 POWs were brought home as part of that operation, and our dear friend Sam was one of those. Sometimes there are people that do great things, but very few people know about it. People that are only their family or a few close friends. Sam Johnson's life has not been that way because it's been recognized because his achievements are so outstanding, and he's been such a leader. So I think they're to be repeated tonight. 2 Silver Stars, 2 Legions of Merit, the Distinguished Flying Cross, a Bronze Star with Valor, 2 Purple Hearts, 4 Air Medals, 3 Outstanding Unit Awards, and the Congressional Medal of Honor Society gave Johnson their highest civilian accolade, the National Patriot Award. Sam, it's such an honor for all of us to serve in this house with you, be a friend of yours, and learn from you. Thank you for all your service. I yield back my time.
Mr. Speaker, I'll yield to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Michael Conaway. 2 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized.
Well, I thank the gentleman from Texas for setting up this evening to honor our friend and colleague Sam Johnson. Sam's career and exploits have been talked about several times now, and I won't repeat those, but there are a couple of things I would like to highlight. One, not only was he a participant in the he was an Air Force pilot, but he was also a member of the elite Thunderbirds, which is the Air Force's best of the best, that is a demonstration team that goes across this country and around the world, representing the Air Force, representing our country. Another thing about Sam is that he had the good fortune of marrying Shirley. If you read Sam's book, Captive Warrior, one of the most poignant parts of that book is Shirley's unwavering, steadfast belief that Sam was still alive. There was a long time there that while Sam was in captivity, that we didn't have a proof of life. And Shirley was being told by some very influential folks that Sam had perished. And she just flat out simply refused to believe that. Throughout all the evidence, and so for a number of years there, she was held that vigil, and it was rewarded, of course, by Sam's coming home some 40 years ago this week. I don't have a lot of heroes on this earth. Sam Johnson's one of them. If I ever get around to writing memoirs, if someone asks me what I'm the most proud of service in this house, one of those things will be to be able to say that I'm among that select and privileged group to have served with Sam Johnson. He is a warrior of the best order, and it is with the most heartfelt emotions that I can muster that I thank him for his service. If I count the years correctly, it's 29 in the Air Force, 10 years in the Texas legislature, and some 22 years here. That's 61 years. I don't know how old Sam is, but that's got to be about half his life anyway. So it is with great pleasure that I thank Sam for his long service to our country, and I yield back. Thank you, Sam.
Thank the gentleman from Texas. Now I yield to the gentleman from Round Rock, Texas, Judge John Carter.
The gentleman is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Sam Johnson's an American hero, and everybody in this house knows that. He's an American hero for all kinds of ways that he has served this country. And many other people talk here are going to talk about those ways, and every one of them, they're important. But I read Sam's book. It's an awesome book. It makes you cry at points. It makes you struggle. But it also expresses the kind of a man and, quite frankly, the kind of a family Sam Johnson has. Sam was a guy with broken leg, dislocated shoulders, who looked them straight in the eye and spit in their face and told them to take your best shot. And he suffered for it, suffered unmercifully for it. But he never gave in to the enemy. He always stood his ground to his detriment. And it harmed him in so many physical ways. And yet, the thing that makes me always tear up is that you read the part of the book where Sam steps off that plane when we finally repatriated our prisoners and saluted and said, "Colonel Sam Johnson reporting for duty, sir." And Sam reports for duty. You know, people say, who do you want to have your back in a foxhole? But people also say, who do you want to have your back in Congress? And I want Sam Johnson to have my back in Congress. He's a friend. He's one of my best friends in this Congress. I've gotten to know him very well. He and I go to to a Christian retreat together almost every year. And that's one of the things you notice from the book. Sam didn't talk about himself. He talked about when they took him out and he thought, this time they're going to shoot me. And he prayed to God that he could stand there and be a man. And they went ready, aim, fire, click. And one more time, they didn't shoot him. And at that time, he thanked God and his Savior because he knew he had witnessed a miracle. Meanwhile, his sweet wife was praying and fighting on the home front because she didn't know, she got very little news about what was going on in Sam's life. But she never gave up because her faith strengthened her. And that's part of the theme of that book that you need to pick up and read. That their faith strengthened them in trials that none of us can ever imagine. Sam Johnson's a hero not just because of what went on in Vietnam and what our enemy did to him. He's a hero because he comes here every day and he fights for the people of his district and for the state and for this country. He's willing to take a risk and step out even now after all the years of service, both legislatively and in the Congress. Sam Johnson is one that's willing to step out and take the shots. I was once asked by 60 Minutes, define what a leader is. And I said, well, I'm just a history guy who reads history. And I always thought in the First World War how hard it would have been to come out of those trenches and charge those machine guns with a bolt-action rifle, and that the officers who climbed out in front and said, let's go, boys, let's go get them, were the heroes. And the guys that stayed in the bottom and said, you go get them, boys, they were not heroes. And a special hero is one who says, I'm going first, and I'll take the shots. There's plenty of shots to be had in this chamber, and those are political shots. But I'm proud to say that that same hero that spit in the enemy's face, Sam Johnson, is still willing to stand up and take the shots in Congress. And for that reason, I today honor my good friend Sam Johnson and tell him I want him to keep taking care of my back because I need it real bad. God bless you, Sam. You're my friend.
I thank the gentleman, Mr. Speaker. Judge Carter points out something that happened to Sam Johnson during that 7 years that a lot of people don't realize. When he was in that little cell, 3 foot by 9 foot, he was so obstinate, they would bring the Vietnamese, North Vietnamese army, they'd take him out of the cell, they'd beat him up, he'd never break. They'd get so mad at that he wouldn't break, that they'd line him up against a wall. And they would tell him they're going to shoot him. They'd blindfold him, they would get their AK-47s ready, and as Judge Carter mentioned, they'd pull the trigger, click, click, click. And then they would laugh at him. Sam Johnson would say, is that the best you got? Is that the best you got? He didn't take anything from the Vietnamese, even though they tried to do everything they could to break him down. And that's what makes him so remarkable. You may notice, Mr. Speaker, he's sitting back here on our scriptural row. All the Texans sit on the same row. He sits in the middle. One reason we sit back there is because that's the row he picks. So we all sit next to him, and you'll see every day when the House is in session, the Texans, we're all together sitting around Sam Johnson, and we kind of stick together for a lot of reasons. I'm going to yield to the gentleman from Texas, Dr. Michael Burgess.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, we are here tonight to honor Congressman Sam Johnson. And you know, it's also appropriate to take a moment and send our thoughts and prayers to Congressman Johnson's family during a difficult time that they're going through right now. As we've heard tonight, Congressman Johnson is a decorated war hero, 29 years service in the United States Air Force, 62 combat missions in the Korean War, and 25 missions in Vietnam. He endured prisoner of war in Hanoi, with a majority spent in solitary confinement after being captured by the North Vietnamese. Congressman Johnson persevered through this dreadful experience, returned to the United States, and was reunited with his wife and 3 children on February 12, 1973. And this week marks the 40th anniversary of his release, and we celebrate his achievements and his sacrifice for our country. In fact, 10 years ago this week, I gave what was my first speech on the House floor, honoring then Sam Johnson's 30th anniversary of freedom, and at that time his wife Shirley was with us in the gallery. When Sam came home, he undertook a duty to continuously support and protect every man and woman who risked their lives fighting for the United States of America. This was a motivation for his decision to run for office, and it is a true statement to the character and virtues that he gained from service to this country. And you know, thinking about Shirley, every summer she does a fashion show in Frisco, Texas. Sam is my neighbor to the east from the congressional district that I represent. And Shirley does a fashion show, and the proceeds go to provide scholarships for kids in the area. True dedication to community service, and we're also honored to have Sam and Shirley in our lives. Thank you, Congressman Johnson. Thank you for being my friend, my mentor, providing me expertise when I ran for the House and when I arrived in the House, and you continue to provide mentorship to me today. I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank the gentleman. I ask unanimous consent, Mr. Speaker, to place in the record a statement by Congressman Jeb Henserling.
The gentleman's request will be covered by general leave.
I now yield to the gentleman from Tyler, Texas, Judge Goldmert.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank my friend, former judge as well. It is an honor to be here, to be part of this special order to honor our friend Sam Johnson. Sam and Shirley are public servants in every sense of the word. There is 29 years in the Air Force. The United States service was what he was. It's what he did. 7 years in Hanoi Hilton, one of the worst prisons ever concocted in the imagination of sick minds, and 42 months of that in solitary confinement. There are people running around the world saying you can't put people in solitary confinement, but they were not around to help Sam Johnson during that horrible time in Hanoi. This is the 40th anniversary of his release, and America has been better for Sam Johnson living and serving, and Shirley being his partner, even though 7 years they were apart. I know the first day I was sworn in, I was sitting right over here on the aisle talking to another Republican, and Sam came down the aisle. His body still shows the torture and the broken bones that never healed properly, and the bones that grew around nerves that were never able to fix. And when he got even with me, I stood up and shook his hand and said, "Sam, it is such an honor to serve with you in this body." And Sam has always been a man of honesty and integrity, a man whose judgment I could trust. And he said, "Well, it's an honor serving with you," which was a stretch. But then he said, "But don't trust that fella next to you." I found out after that Sam Johnson's advice was always good and always advice that could be well taken. After some of the revelations in the Middle East of a U.S. prison camp, I said, "Sam, did you hear about the torture of making people strip down and put panties on their heads?" And he had said, "Yeah." I said, "Was that ever a choice that you were given?" He said, "If it had been, I'd be naked wearing panties still today." There was nothing compared to the hell that man was put through in Hanoi. When I found out that in our U.S. prisons, it's open information, we provide not only a Quran that's never been touched by American hands, but also an arrow on the floor pointing the direction that the Islamic prisoner would want to pray, and give them a prayer rug. And I asked Sam, when you were in Hanoi, did you have people, as that was part of your faith? And he said, "No, actually, What we had was a tiny little rod that was placed on the floor, our feet in shackles. We would be beat on the back until we dropped, and my knees would hit that tiny rod. Doesn't sound like much, but when you spend hours or days with your knees and all your weight on a tiny little rod on the floor, it gets pretty unbearable. And that was some of the less tortuous stuff this man went through on our behalf. Part of his service to this country are his children and his grandchildren. And it is with great sadness that I know Sam and Shirley in this country lost Bob Johnson. From Plano High School to Texas A&M, his children and grandchildren. Sam, our hearts are with you. You have sacrificed more than anybody I know on behalf of this country, and it is an honor to serve with you. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman from Tyler, Texas. I now yield to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Lamar Smith.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I want to thank the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, for organizing this special order tonight. And Mr. Speaker, today's special order is to honor our friend, colleague, and a true American patriot, Congressman Sam Johnson, and his 40th anniversary of freedom. Congressman Johnson has a long history of serving our country. He spent 29 years in the United States Air Force and flew 87 combat missions during the Korean and Vietnam Wars. He was awarded 2 Silver Stars, a Distinguished Flying Cross, a Bronze Star with Valor, and received many other recognitions. Today we celebrate Operation Homecoming and observe the 40th anniversary of his release from a Vietnamese prisoner of war camp. Congressman Sam Johnson was captured and held for 7 years in a POW camp in Vietnam. He spent 42 months in solitary confinement, an unfortunate record. Though tested both physically and mentally, almost beyond comprehension, his unwavering love of God and country remained steadfast. A first-hand account of Congressman Johnson's experience in the Vietnamese POW camp can be found in his riveting and inspiring book, Captive Warriors, which will cause you to weep. His commitment to his country was matched only by his wife Shirley's commitment to him. Friends say she set a seat at the table every night while he was gone with the hope and expectation that he would come home. After his release, Congressman Johnson started a home building business from the ground up. Then he was elected to the Texas House of Representatives for 7 years, and he has now represented Texas's 3rd congressional district since 1991. It's a professional honor and a personal privilege to serve with Congressman Sam Johnson. Today we thank him for his service to our country and to the American people. Yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield to another aviator, although he wasn't in the Air Force, he was in the Navy. It still counts, but he served our country as a naval aviator before Mr. Pete Olson came to the House of Representatives. Pete Olson of Sugar Land, Texas, recognize him for his, yield to him as much time as he wishes.
Gentleman is recognized.
I want to thank my friend and fellow Texan, Judge Ted Poe, for hosting this special order celebrating the greatest Texan in Congress, Colonel Sam Johnson, on the 40th anniversary of his return home after 7 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. We've heard the stories of Sam's lifetime of service to our nation. They are the stuff of legend, the best of the best. Sam was shot down on his 25th mission over Vietnam, captured and imprisoned by the enemy. He was put in a special prison known as Alcatraz, whose 2 years in Alcatraz were described by Sam as, quote, hell on earth, end quote. After Sam left Alcatraz, I began my training to become a naval aviator. Part of that training included prisoner of war school, also known as SEER school, for survive, evade, resist, and escape. In SEER school, we were locked in a dark box, deprived of sleep, exposed to interrogation techniques depicted in the movie Zero Dark 30. The main lesson I learned in SEER school was because of Sam Johnson, that my duty as a POW was to resist, and to resist, and to resist, and to resist, and to resist, to my breaking point as a human being. And when I hit that point, my duty was to bend a little, give some incomplete or vague information, regroup, and start anew. To resist, to resist, to resist, to resist, and to resist. Because of Sam Johnson's experience, every U.S. military pilot who follows in his footsteps, like me, knows in our hearts that if we're captured, we will never stop resisting our captors, and we will always come home with honor, like Sam did. The heart of Sam Johnson, the Sam Johnson that I know, can be summed up in the first sentence Sam reportedly said to his fellow POWs after he left solitary confinement. Sam said, "Lieutenant Colonel Sam Johnson, reporting for duty, sir." I imagine that our POW in charge responded to Sam like this: "Colonel Johnson, take charge and carry out the plan of the day." Sam has been taking charge and carrying out the plan of the day his whole life. I wasn't there to greet Sam when he came home 40 years ago. So I'll say it to my friend now. Welcome home, Sam. Welcome home. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman from Sugar Land, Texas, Mr. Olson, for his insightful words. You pointed out, Mr. Olson, that he spent 4 years in a prisoner of war camp. During that 4 years, he didn't talk to another American for 4 years. He could tap on the wall to contact them, and codes that they had developed over the numerous years they had all been in confinement. And they tapped out the names of the other prisoners, the 374 other prisoners that had been in the Hanoi Hilton at one time. They all memorized the 11, the Alcatraz gang as they called themselves. They memorized those names because they all expected they were going to escape and get back and be able to tell those families who had come into the camp. So, remarkable story. I now yield to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roger Williams.
Gentleman is recognized.
I'm honored to stand here today and say a few words about one of my personal heroes and friends and one of America's greatest patriots, Sam Johnson. This month is cause for celebration as it marks 40 years since nearly 600 American POWs, including Congressman Johnson, stepped foot on American soil after enduring years of captivity in the Vietnam War. Many of us couldn't endure for one day what Sam Johnson endured for 7 years, much less endure it with unbreakable strength, unending faith in God, and constant hope that this incredible man has. His captors knew him as a diehard, one of the few POWs who refused to give in and cooperate with their anti-American propaganda. His fellow American prisoners knew him as a leader, one whose spirit could not be broken, whether he was in leg stocks or solitary confinement for 4 years. And his family knew him as their hero, a man who loved serving his country and was willing to sacrifice his life in defense of freedom. I'm honored to know him as a friend. Through his 29-year career in the Air Force, he earned many distinguished decorations, awards, and merits. But for those who have had the pleasure of sitting at the dinner table with Sam, we're also filled with laughter and antics. After all, he did fly with the legendary Thunderbirds before the FAA existed. Men like Sam Johnson were what have made our military great and our country the greatest force on earth. He has built a remarkable legacy with his lifelong service to America, to the great state of Texas, and most important, to his family and loved ones. Colonel Johnson, thank you for your service to our country and for your example to us all. And I'd like to remind people America doesn't give because it's rich. America's rich because it gives. And it's given to Sam Johnson, and for that we're very grateful. Luke 6:38 says, a good measure be given to you, pressed down, shaken together, put into your lap, for the measure you give will be the measure you get back. Sam, you gave it all to us. You deserve every great thing that happens to you. So may God bless you, and may God bless our troops. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. And now I yield to the gentleman from Lubbock, Texas, Mr. Randy Naugebauer.
Well, I thank the gentleman, and it's indeed an honor and a privilege for me to participate in this recognition of our colleague, but more importantly, my friend, Sam Johnson. You know, when I got to Congress, you get to know people, and particularly because Sam was in the Texas delegation, and you know, people started, they would say, you know Sam's story, and they would begin to tell me a few things about Sam Johnson. And so some of the things that you're hearing tonight are things you would have never heard from Sam Johnson, because Sam doesn't talk about what he does. He just goes about doing the right thing. In fact, he's got a history of serving this country. When you think about Sam Johnson, you think about service. You know, and a lot of people serve. And Sam has served our military, served in our Texas House, and now in the United States Congress. And not everybody serves with equal sacrifice. And when you think about Sam Johnson's life, you think about sacrifice. How I learned more about Sam was an interesting trip that I took with then Speaker of the House, Denny Hastert. And we flew to Vietnam to be one of the first delegations to have a Speaker of the House be in Vietnam since the end of the Vietnam War. And so I decided on that trip, that I would read Sam's book. So all the way over there, I read Sam's book. And it was just by fate that I read the last page as we landed in Hanoi. Tears streaming down my eyes as I had been on this journey that Sam takes you through with his book of sacrifice and pain, but also a man that had faith. And it was his faith that he relied on a daily basis, and his commitment to his country and the commitment to those who were with him, and the fortitude that he showed of taking those daily, sometimes beatings, and that's in this quietness of solitude. And as we landed there, and I was thinking about Sam, and thinking then at spending 7 years in those conditions, and then coming back home. But as you read that book, what you also know, there's another hero, and Sam would tell you, he'd be quick to point out, and that was his wife, Shirley, who never gave up hope, never gave up on Sam, because she knew the Sam Johnson that we've been talking about tonight. She knew that Sam wouldn't go down easy. And Sam, we are so proud of you and so glad to serve with you. And one of the memorable points of that trip is just a few months before that, Sam himself had traveled back to Hanoi the first time since he had left. And he had signed the guest book just a few pages over. Sam Johnson, back again, where I spent 7 years of my life. It was an honor for me to sign just a few pages over for a great American hero, but more importantly, for a great friend. God bless you, Sam Johnson, and God bless the United States of America.
Thank the gentleman. Thank the gentleman. I'd ask the Speaker, how much time do I have left?
The gentleman has 17 minutes remaining.
I thank the Speaker. I yield to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Blake Farenthold.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Congressman Poe. You know, I'm honored today to stand up here to honor the bravery and commitment that Congressman Sam Johnson has shown his country. Sam lived through an experience that would bring even the toughest soldier to his knees. He was in the Air Force 29 years and then was a prisoner of war for 7 after his F-4 plane was gunned down in North Vietnam. Now, today, 40 years after he was released, we celebrate his freedom.
You know, he was beaten and tortured and kept in a small cell, yet he refused to give up or disclose any information to the enemy. The sacrifice and peril that Sam went through is on the heart of every young man and woman who commits themselves to serve the armed forces. And you know, Sam and his family just suffered a tragic personal loss. You know, I have notes here. You can read about Sam and his accomplishments and his heroics on the internet, or better yet, buy the book. I want to talk for a minute about my experience in the slightly over 2 years that I've been in this house serving with Sam. You know, there is nobody that has the respect of this Congress the way Sam Johnson does. I don't know a single person on either side of the aisle that doesn't appreciate Sam's service and sacrifice and hold him in the highest esteem. And that's saying something when we're serving in a body that's constantly bickering, that has a 8% approval rating. But if all of us who serve were half the man that Sam Johnson is, we would have a 100% approval rating here in Congress. I'm honored to serve with Sam. I thank him for his service, so that seems just too little for what he has done and given up for this country. But I am proud to call him a friend. God bless you, Sam. God bless Texas, and God bless the USA.
I thank the gentleman for his comments. Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Steve Stock.
Sam, when I got here 18 years ago, I first got here, I was wet under the ears, and I started looking at different people's voting patterns, and I didn't know, which way to go or whatever. Also, I noticed Sam in private is the way he is publicly. And privately, Sam, you're a hardcore American patriot. And I started learning a lot from you. But reading your history and what you did, I just can't imagine being in that confinement for that period of time. It seems like it would be beyond what anybody could take. Yet time and time again, you stood up, and there was only 11 of you that resisted the torture and resisted the torture of the Vietnamese, which broke every Geneva Convention protocol. And Sam, in this area in which you served and our nation, I understand, I think it was 5 rows across and 5 rows down. So AA would be tap, tap, B would be tap, tap, tap. In other words, they would do the alphabet 5, 5 that way. And they would tap out at night. And that's all the communication they had. And serving with Sam and watching Sam go through his service and his commitment to the American people, I don't know if we actually read all of his medals, but you have, I got to get here, he has 2 Silver Stars, 2 Legions of Merit, Distinguished Flying Cross, the Bronze Stars with Combat Valor, 2 Purple Hearts, 4 Air Medals, 3 Air Force Outstanding Units, and also awarded for Prisoner of Medal Award. That's just one individual having all those medals. And he served our nation and our country, continues to serve our nation and country, and I'm honored to serve with Sam. And at this time when he's lost his son, you're in our prayers. God bless you, and thank you for offering the opportunity to say a little bit on behalf of Sam. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. I now yield to Mr. Bill Flores from Texas.
I thank the gentleman from Texas for organizing this very special evening. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to express my deepest admiration and respect for Congressman Sam Johnson. Tonight, America has heard many accolades for and compliments dedicated to Sam Johnson, and I'm not going to repeat those in my comments. Rather, I want to say that our country needs more Sam Johnsons during these difficult times. We need more persons like Sam to bravely move and serve in our country's military today. We need more persons like Sam to serve as statesmen. We need more people like Sam who put principle ahead of politics or personal gain. We need more persons like Sam to be knightly gentlemen of society. We need more persons like Sam who are devoted husbands and loving fathers. Mr. Speaker, America needs more heroes like Sam Johnson. I pray that America continues to produce men and women of strength and perseverance and character like Sam Johnson. God bless Sam, his wife Shirley, and his family. In particular, we remember their son, Bob Johnson, this evening. I'm honored and humbled, and I have to say deeply humbled, to serve with my good friend from Texas, Congressman Sam Johnson. Thank you. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his comments. Mr. Speaker, Sam Johnson is a remarkable individual. The nickname that the North Vietnamese gave him of Die Hard, he's still that way. He's hardcore. He is opinionated, and he can back up everything he says. But that's a good thing. He does represent the best that we have in this country, his military background. We have in the House of Representatives members of Congress, both sides, that have served in our military. All branches, in the reserves, the National Guard. They served in World War II. They served in Korea and Vietnam, like Sam Johnson. They've served in both Iraqi wars, the Afghanistan war, and they're still serving today. We have members who have lost their limbs for this country while on active duty serving this country. And Sam Johnson is among that elite that have represented America, the flag, and our country when our country needed our military. He's married, 3 kids. You now know that one of them died recently, and he has 10 grandkids. He served in the war, the second war, not the Korean War, but the second one, the Vietnamese War. Came back home. Americans didn't treat our war veterans from Vietnam very well. They were treated real bad, in fact. Some of our American troops, when they came back home from serving in Vietnam, they wouldn't wear the uniform because Americans would ridicule them for what the country asked them to do. And America has learned since Vietnam. We treat our warriors a lot better now. We treat them like they ought to be treated when they come back home from Iraq, Afghanistan, and other parts of the world. Our warriors from Vietnam didn't get the appropriate welcome back, and as already mentioned, tonight we welcome back one of them. We welcome back Colonel Sam Johnson, United States Air Force, reporting for duty. After spending 7 years in a prisoner of war camp, 4 years in solitary confinement, as I pointed out, 9 foot by 3 foot for 4 years, 24 hours a day. Leg irons at night, taken out in the daytime and beat. Never broke. Die hard. Never gave in. He was never broken. Remarkable individual, these Americans who serve and wear the uniform. It's a rare breed, but it's the American breed. And that's what makes us free. Those people, those remarkable people who wear the uniform and serve overseas, and serve in prisoner of war camps if necessary. So we thank Sam Johnson. We thank all who have served and are serving today for their service to our great country. But especially tonight, we welcome home Sam Johnson of the United States Air Force. And I yield back the remainder of my time. And that's just the way it is.
Back.